Welcome to The Culture. We rest at the pulse of the community, providing all things news, music, fashion, events, and everything that we talk about in between. It's a lifestyle. We are The Culture.
Thank you for another edition of The Culture. At this point here in South Florida, we're looking at over 20,000 positive COVID-19 cases. And today we have an opportunity to be joined by Lisa Franklin, a young lady who has looked at COVID-19 in the face and is now on the other side of that pandemic or disease or whatever it is being termed as. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And you are one of the positive success stories of COVID-19. How did it all happen?
It was actually really weird because we, as a family, had decided to quarantine about a day earlier than the schools. And so, because we have a daughter in our household that still has kind of a compromised immune system. So the kids were all home for a day before the schools closed. And for the next 2 weeks, we just worked out outside as a family. We stayed, the kids didn't go to the grocery store with us. My husband and I went separately, and, the other person would stay in the car. And the Sunday before I got sick, we still decided to do kind of our 5-mile, 6-mile workout. I was running stairs and I felt a little weird, but I thought it was like a sinus infection. And
like you say weird, what was it?
I felt a little dizzy. I felt like there was congestion here in my face, but my throat was a little sore and I had a cough. And I have a teen in my house who had been reading about this, and he said, well, hold your breath for 30 seconds. If you can hold your breath without coughing, you don't have it. And so we did this whole thing and we laughed about it, and I was able to do it. And so I didn't think anything of it. I mean, obviously, if I had known, I would not have been around the rest of the family. And so the next day, I still had continued pressure, text the doctor. They recommended that I just get, something over the counter, nothing major. And then that night I had chills, somewhat of a fever when I woke up the next morning. And then I woke up, my body just ached. And I felt kind of like, well, maybe I can't work out as hard as I used to be. Because like I said, we were running stairs and sit-ups and push-ups. And then, there was a part where I got up that morning and went to go brush my teeth and had no energy. And so I almost passed out and broke out in a sweat. And so that's when I texted the doctor back and was like, it's just a little odd to me. It's just, I'm usually someone that doesn't like a lot of medicine. But I was concerned that if I did have something, I didn't want to infect anybody in the house. And so he asked me to completely, immediately quarantine myself. He called in a prescription, still thinking it was sinus, but asked us to monitor it. And so just like take my temperature. And then the next day, I started having trouble breathing. And
are we on Tuesday or Wednesday?
We're on Wednesday now.
Okay.
And at first you think you're not sure if you're having trouble breathing. So you're kind of, you're waiting to see, you're kind of trying to sit yourself up. And obviously I'm quarantined from the rest of the house. And by the end of probably around 5 or 6 o'clock, I texted the doctor back and was like, it doesn't feel right. And so he sent me to the ER and asked them to do a chest x-ray. And still not thinking that I had COVID, because obviously and I went to an urgent care. So that's the difference. It wasn't the general ER. So, obviously you're talking about a smaller locale, and they don't really have the ability to be able to quarantine you from everybody else. So I went, explained to them he wanted a chest x-ray. They checked my oxygen level. My oxygen level was about 96. They're like, that's good. They got the chest x-ray back and saw that there was pneumonia on my right lung. And so immediately they usher me into another room. Everybody kind of dons these, this gear. It kind of looks like you're in the movies.
Right.
And they begin to depressurize, I think, the room. So they start pumping in air before anybody else will come in. And then explain that, while they was 90% sure it was just pneumonia. And again, this is the beginning. So this is March 30th. Okay. So this is still fairly new, where people were still trying to figure out that, 90% of the time right now, if someone has pneumonia, it is probably COVID related. but they didn't make the connection at that point because they were still learning. And so they're like, we're 90% sure it is, but we're just going to take a COVID test just in case.
So they did have the testing there at the ER. I mean, at the
urgent care. They did, but it was a 5-day test. So their concern was what does the CT scan say? So they had done an X-ray. So then they send us to the emergency room for them to admit me, to run blood tests and to also do the CT scan.
What is that? What would the scan come back and say?
So the scan would probably show them, because the X-ray is just showing the preliminary imaging that there's something there, and you can see kind of the CT scan will show them the shape, the size, if it is moved, where it is in the lung. But when we got to the ER said that they could not do a CT scan unless it was life or death, because their new protocol, if they did a CT scan, they would have to take the CT machine off of rotation for 4 to 6 hours while the whole room was sanitized.
Wow.
So I'm in these and obviously they don't let your spouse come in. So, they admitted me and put me back in these rooms where you unzip, and it was kind of odd for me because at the time I'm still thinking I don't have COVID. And so I'm wondering, well, wow, I'm around a number of people who potentially have it. It's kind of opening me up, but it's the best that the hospital could do, right? In this situation, they don't know. So they kept me for about 9 hours, and I was able to go home. They told me to wait for the test results, and the doctor put me on an antibiotic, which, as you guys know, that doesn't do anything for COVID, but if there was something else that was in my body. And, the next 2 days, I thought I was fine. I didn't really have, everything was manageable. It wasn't, so I'm still in quarantine. And then we hit Friday, and then I can barely hold my head up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so that Wednesday, Thursday, as far as your energy level, coughing, chills?
No, nothing.
No? Okay.
And then Friday, so I don't know if we caught it early enough because I kind of was, something feels off, and I hadn't really progressed enough. But that Friday, I couldn't hold my head up. I was on conference calls, and I wasn't able to focus. I was foggy. And so by the end of the day, I literally probably laid down for 12 hours. I got back up and had fever. Everything was bad. And so they wanted to put me in the hospital because my breathing had changed. I was against it just for reasons of just knowing individuals who had gone in, caught additional infections. Once they got vented, I actually had a classmate who passed away the day before I found out I had pneumonia. And it was kind of the same thing. He had the pneumonia. And so I just was against being vented, not saying that anyone else should do that. But so what they did is they put my husband on a rotation of coming in and check my blood pressure, we ordered like the oximeter machine. We had the thermometer, the breathing machine, and the nebulizer. And so he came in every hour and was just checking my temperature, checking my blood pressure. My blood pressure was going down. And so they had me on breathing probably every 3 hours on breathing treatments. And what was probably most, I think scary for me as an individual, as a mom, as a wife, is that the breathing part had unearthed a 35-year-old asthma that I had not had an issue with at all. And what it did is that the COVID was attacking the outside muscles of my chest, but the pneumonia and asthma were constricting the inside. So I couldn't even gasp, right? And I remember one moment just gasping, almost tearing up, like praying. And I was able to kind of let up something, but it's like your back locked up, but your lungs locked up. And it's the worst feeling in the world. Like I can't even explain. You really think that you're at that moment where that this is probably going to be something that has you transition. And, I was probably 2 days there where I was, concerned that is actually what will happen. So.
Remarkable story. So right now we are roughly at the end of that first week. We're almost at Saturday, moving into Sunday. Yes. You'd already taken your test. of the test that you took at the urgent care. You haven't gotten your results back at this point. When did you finally get your results back?
So Sunday, I start to lose my taste, my smell, everything. And I realized at that point with the fever and everything else that I probably do have it. So Monday morning was the day that I got the results. But at that point, I already knew.
Right.
That I had it.
So did you text back your doctor?
I did. And at that point, he says, well, now we have to quarantine you 14 days from the day of the test. So,
and then you were quarantined for 20 some odd days, right?
Right. So by the time I found out, I had already been quarantined for 7 days. Okay. So it took me to 14 would have taken me to day 22, but I still had, I had to be 3 days with no symptoms. So, once that happened, again, I'm starting to feel fine. I think I'm on the other side. And then that Wednesday, it starts to go downhill again. So all of the symptoms come back.
So then on that Monday, you've received the positive test. You have alerted your doctor. Did he at that point prescribe anything for any other treatment outside of what you were already doing with your husband's help?
So I got another treatment for my lungs. So I was on 2 meds for just the lungs to try to open the lungs up. Obviously, I added a lot of homeopathic, holistic turmeric, was drinking turmeric and a number of other things to kind of slow down the inflammation, because that was seeming to kind of cut off my lungs and my breathing. And then he also put me on a second antibiotic. So, there's a length as to how long you can be on one. And so when that ran out, I was picking up another antibiotic, but that was to combat what was in the lungs. So if it was, because obviously you can't tell if it's, what you're fighting. So they're prescribing to kind of counter a number of different things.
Wow. Wow. And so you started that medication on Monday immediately?
I started it on Tuesday. So I started breathing on Monday. So I was doing 2 different meds for my lungs on Monday. And then Tuesday, I started the additional antibiotic.
And then Wednesday, you felt better. Oh, no. Wednesday.
When I started feeling worse. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And did they tell you why because now you're on the medication, which should have made you feel better, and it's not working?
No, because I don't think the medication helps with the virus. I feel like the virus has to take its course. Because the other things that we were combating is that you completely lose, like water taste. When you say lose taste, like even water is hard to consume. So I wasn't taking in enough liquids. I didn't have an appetite. I had lost about 15 pounds. And so my kidneys started to react because you're putting so much medication in your body that now your kidneys are starting to. And so you see kind of how individuals start to have different things fail within their body. And then you're also you're trying not to lay flat, which is difficult when you can't hold your head up because it affects the breathing. But then you're not moving because you really just don't have the energy, which also can lead to the blood clots, which is another issue that most people are having.
So then did you also have to try to change your diet?
There was no diet.
And that's why I'm asking, like, how were you getting nutrients? You weren't.
So I wasn't. And then what I was at least doing was drinking tea. So I would drink green teen or turmeric tea, which the taste doesn't matter if you don't have a taste. They're kind of strong, have strong taste. And then my family started going to get just soup broth so that I could at least get in, 3 or 4 spoonfuls. So between those, hopefully I was getting enough liquid to kind of flush my kidneys, but then also to get something in my body. But that's, probably why. I lost 15 pounds within 7 days. So.
Wow. So you have now started with the second antibiotic. You are intaking broth and your teas. How long were you looking at that regimen before there was a break?
It was another 7 days.
And so you were still on the breathing machines as well?
Yes, I'm actually still on the breathing machine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think at this point that is something that you're going to continue?
I hope not, but the reality of it is that I'm only 70% of where I was prior. So I haven't been able to, we're now 32 days out. I haven't been able to really resume any kind of activity because I'm still having labored breathing. So yesterday was the first time like they had me get in the pool and try to just even do, simple aerobic type activities to get my arms and legs moving. But we're waiting now for x-rays on the lungs to see if there's scarring, because a number of people who've had the extreme kind of lung response have also had scarring in their lungs afterwards.
And did your doctor tell you whether or not your breathing right now was a result of asthma, or was it an offset now of COVID?
Well, that's what was hard for them to find out until we have the x-ray. Obviously, I haven't had anything related to asthma and I said 30, we're probably looking at 35 years. So to have it now on the, after this experience is, they're waiting to see if it is related. The funny part is that you can't get imaging here, in our area at least, without a negative test. So to then find some place, so that's what we're waiting on now, for a place that will do a retest so that you can get a negative test. So any of the imaging centers will actually do the x-ray, because if you're still positive, they don't want you in their facility.
And then with this next test, are they saying that you have to go into like an urgent care or an emergency room for that?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. So, all the doctors are kind of working around trying to figure out where, which location will allow me to come in and do the retest. As of right now, any facilities like a doctor's center or even the urgent care will not allow you to come in already being positive and a known positive case.
Wow. So there's a lot that still needs to be figured out from a health standpoint with the federal administration and even local government to try to assist. I've heard of other people having I think one person, but they were in the hospital. They did receive the test again, and I think they received 2 tests. Once it was negative one day, and then they got another negative test back. They were released, but they were hospitalized. And so that is the big difference. That's the big difference. And Lisa, any other advice that you can give to our audience?
Yeah, I think number one, if you feel like you have the symptoms or any symptoms, coughing, fever, chills, a lot of times people are looking for just fever. Chills is a big indicator of that as well. If you feel like you're dizzy, lightheaded, or you have abdominal pain, all of those now, or chest pain, all of those now are leading to positive results. So I would contact your health provider immediately. We were lucky enough to have ours kind of, have the ability to text ours and have direct access. If you can't get in touch with your healthcare provider, I would, suggest that it's someone that you trust that's in the medical field to get the ball rolling. Immediately quarantine yourself from the rest of the house. I mean, I've heard a number of cases where both parents have been sick and you have kids in the house that you're trying to take care of. It's not ideal, because if you think about it, most people aren't going to take your children in if they have 2 parents that are already sick. They'll assume that they have it as well, especially since, I don't know if my kids were I just know that they were asymptomatic. I don't know whether or not they at some point had it. I just know that they don't now, right? And so they could have been carrying it and passed it to us. We don't know. The third thing I would say is balancing holistic and the medicine, because, for me personally, the turmeric, the green tea, natural honey and all of that, lemon water, were all super impactful for me kind of opening up my lungs and calming the inflammation that was happening in my body. And then the last piece would be moving, just keeping, that's the hard part, because you're laying down, you don't feel like moving. I went from doing, 20,000 steps a day and 6 miles to I was doing maybe 10 steps a day, just from the bed to the bathroom. And so the disease progressed during that time that I completely could not move. It just started to get worse, and my lungs started to lock up even more. And so I would say, even within your room or wherever you're quarantined, keep moving, arms up, trying to stretch out your lungs, and just continue to try to fight it with everything that you have, because that's the part. There's a natural, part of it where you're exhausted and you just want to lay down or rest from it, and you can't, because that's when you're seeing a lot of people seeing their, progression of the disease go in a negative direction, because either they are, to your point, in a hospital, or they're laying down, they're on a ventilator, you can't move much. But that's when the disease actually progresses, when you can't move and kind of work through it.
Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your story. We appreciate everything that you have given to us, to our viewers. I am certain that someone is going to glean insight from your transparency, and we will definitely keep you in our prayers. We thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. I think it's something that people need to see a face that is actually providing real talk on what happened, what their experience is dealing with COVID-19. And thank you all for looking and viewing our show today. Make sure that you like The Culture's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube page, so that you can get more pertinent content to keep you moving through this time period that we're in right now. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Culture.
The Culture is produced and owned by the Culture Media Group and cannot be reproduced or broadcast without written consent. All rights reserved 2021.